perhaps some of you folks will having been.
The U.S. is trying to cool heated concerns about a trade war by possibly sparing some of its allies higher tariffs.
And there are potential carve-outs for Mexico and Canada based on national security and possibly other countries as well.
The decision could calm fears in Canada, America's top supplier of steel and aluminium. But it all comes down to how free trade renegotiations under NAFTA unfold. Mexico and Canada may find themselves facing tariffs once again if those talks fail to reach a new agreement. And despite the U.S. possibly extending the exemptions to other countries, the European Union says it's not taking any chances.
From what we understand, the motivation of the US is an economic safeguard measure in disguise, not a national security measure. That means that the EU is entitled to make use of the WTO safeguard agreement to rebalance benefits that we have given to the US in the past. This would be done by carrying out measures that match the economic loss suffered by us because of the US move.
The EU is mulling a 25% tariff on imported goods from the US. Steel and industrial and agricultural products worth around $3.5 billion could be affected. And China, a big target of Trump's tariff decision, says it's also ready to retaliate.
History showed that trade wars were not the right way to resolve problems, especially given today's globalization. Choosing a trade war is a wrong move. The outcome will only be harmful. China would have to make a justified and necessary response.
Let's get more insights into the ongoing fight over US tariffs, and let's bring in our TRT World editor-at-large, Craig Copetas, who's in Paris for us. Hello, Craig. So Trump now appears to be using his threat of broad-based tariffs to cajole Mexico and Canada into giving concessions in the NAFTA talks. But he seems to be getting this strategy from the more hawkish elements in his administration. Is that what you're hearing as well?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm hearing. And the other thing I'm hearing here, Azar, is that you don't need to impose tariffs to have a trade war. There is a trade war going on, whether one wants to accept it or not. What's going on here right now is Trump wants to get the EU to squeal first, to lower their own tariffs and become more responsive to American demands. And the reason for this, it's the first salvo, the folks in Mar-a-Lago are telling me, because they are still angry with China. This is what it's about. China's ascension to the World Trade Organization 20 years ago did not create a free market economy or prompt China, they say, to abide by the norms of free trade. And what Trump is trying to push here, countering the, the one road, China's one road expansion into the West, is they don't want China to dictate the terms and structure of global trade. That's what this is about. Whether they're successful is another question.
That is interesting, and it's ironic in that context that we heard from Wang Yi just now invoking history and talking about the dangers of global trade wars. We will come back to that further down the road, but for now, Craig Copetas in Paris, thank you very much indeed. Let's bring in David Madden now from London. He's an analyst at CMC Markets. Hello, David. Great to see you once again on Money Talks. Look, how are investors taking the latest developments on the US tariff story? I mean, look, this whole episode, has it changed investors' risk appetite?
It has changed investors' risk appetite, but only somewhat. The Dow Jones over New York has just turned negative, and the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq 100 are just about clinging on to positive territory. But this isn't a major scare story as far as investors are concerned. The announcement last night that Mexico and Canada may be exempt from the tariffs that Mr. Trump is talking about imposing is a sign to the financial markets that this might be a light, or if there is such a thing, a light trade war rather than an all-out aggressive move. Of course, Mr. Trump has also talked about the reshaping and renegotiating of NAFTA. So it could be a case of that America's two neighbours either side of the country could be exempt this time round. But of course, this is all a part of a wider plan to put America first and to make America great again. But traders for the time being aren't actually too nervous. But then again, we haven't actually heard from Mr. Trump. We will hear from him within, say, under 3 hours' time. But once again, this is all about talking tough. If Mr. Trump comes across tough, we may see a bit of ease being given from the likes of, say, the European Union and large trading countries such as China.
A lot of this, as you've said, though, is hypothetical. I mean, you use several operative words there, I thought, may and could among them. But so do you get the sense, though, that investors perhaps are grossly underestimating the potential impact of a global trade war? I mean, we heard from the Chinese foreign minister earlier, warning about the dangers of this. Let's not forget there's lessons of history here.
There are indeed lessons of history, but for the time being, the financial markets have sized up Mr. Trump and feel that this is largely just a ploy, a ruse, in a way to actually get better trading conditions for the United States. Speaking of China, China had some trade figures out overnight. Chinese imports increased by 44%. Sorry, apologies. Chinese exports increased by 44% in February. Its best performance in 2 years. It just goes to show you how much expansion China is already having into the West. And in relation to the European Union, the import levy on American cars brought into the European Union is 4 times the size of the other way around. So it's much easier for Americans to import and cheaper for Americans to import EU cars rather than the other way around. And Mr. Trump isn't happy with this. And to be honest, neither are some of his voters, and precisely why Mr. Trump is in the White House. I think this is all about Mr. Trump puffing out his chest, talking about putting America first, and hopefully getting a reaction from the likes of the Chinese or the EU to just bend their relatively expensive tariffs on the US products.
Yep.